A millionaire took a homeless woman to his ex-fiancée's wedding, and what she did shocked everyone behind the door, where we bring you the most incredible real-life stories that will leave you speechless. Before we dive into this story, comment below and tell us which city you're watching from. And once the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our amazing tales. Now, let's get started with today's jaw-dropping story. Marcus Wellington stood outside the Grand Cathedral, adjusting his designer tie for the third time. The invitation in his pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. His ex-fiancée, Victoria, was getting married today to a prominent businessman, and somehow, Marcus had been invited. Perhaps it was her way of showing him what he'd lost, or maybe just a twisted power play. Either way, he couldn't go alone. That morning, while driving through downtown, Marcus had stopped at a red light near the park. That's when he saw her. A woman, probably in her late 20s, sitting on a bench with a worn backpack and a cardboard sign. Her clothes were tattered, but something about her caught his attention. Her eyes held a dignity that the streets hadn't taken away, and she was reading a book, completely absorbed, as if she wasn't sitting in the cold morning air with nowhere to go. On impulse, Marcus pulled over. He approached her cautiously. Her name was Sarah, and she'd been living on the streets for 8 months after losing her job and apartment following a medical emergency that drained her savings. As they talked, Marcus was struck by her intelligence, her humor despite her circumstances, and her remarkable grace. Then, an idea formed in his mind. A crazy, impulsive idea that made absolutely no sense, yet felt perfectly right. He asked Sarah if she'd accompany him to a wedding. Not as a date, but as his guest. He offered her money, a hotel room to get ready, and anything she needed. Sarah was hesitant, suspicious even, but something in Marcus's eyes told her he was genuine. She agreed. 5 hours later, they arrived at the cathedral. Marcus had taken Sarah to a boutique where she chose an elegant navy blue dress. At the salon, the stylists transformed her appearance, revealing the beautiful woman beneath the layers of hardship. But it wasn't just her appearance that had changed. There was a confidence in her step, a light in her eyes that perhaps had been dimmed but never extinguished. As they walked into the wedding together, heads turned. Victoria's eyes widened when she saw Marcus enter, but her expression shifted to confusion, then something unreadable when she saw Sarah beside him. The woman on his arm looked sophisticated, poised, nothing like what anyone expected. The ceremony was beautiful, though Marcus barely paid attention. He was too aware of Sarah beside him, the way she observed everything with quiet thoughtfulness. During the reception, they were seated at a table with several of Victoria's relatives. The conversations were typical wedding small talk until Victoria's aunt, a woman dripping in diamonds and condescension, began making pointed remarks. She looked at Sarah with barely disguised judgment and asked in a loud voice, clearly meant to embarrass, where she was from and what she did. Before Marcus could intervene, Sarah smiled warmly and answered with complete honesty. She explained that she was currently experiencing homelessness, that she'd fallen on hard times, but she was working her way back up. The table fell silent. Victoria's aunt looked triumphant, as if she'd exposed some scandal. But then Sarah continued. She spoke about her previous work as a social worker, about the families she'd helped, the children she'd advocated for. She talked about how losing everything had given her a perspective she'd never had before, about the invisible people we pass every day without seeing. Her words were eloquent, heartfelt, and absolutely genuine. She didn't apologize for her circumstances. She didn't shrink under their judgment. Instead, she turned the moment into something profound, talking about human dignity, compassion, and the thin line between security and crisis that any of us could cross. People at neighboring tables had started listening. The conversations around them had died down. Even the music seemed to fade into the background as Sarah spoke. She wasn't giving a speech, just answering a question, but her words carried a weight that silenced the room. Then she did something that truly shocked everyone. She stood up, walked over to Victoria, and thanked her. She thanked her for the invitation that brought her there, even though it was Marcus who'd invited her. She thanked her for the opportunity to be part of something beautiful on a day when she had nothing. And then she said something that made even the hardest hearts in that room soften. Sarah told Victoria that she hoped her marriage would be filled with the kind of love that sees people not for what they have, but for who they are. She hoped Victoria would never forget how fortunate she was, and that she'd use that fortune to help others when she could. It wasn't bitter or sarcastic. It was genuine, and everyone in that room knew it. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She embraced Sarah, whispering something that only they could hear. Later, Marcus would learn that Victoria had apologized, had seen in that moment how much she'd changed, how much she'd lost herself in the pursuit of status and wealth. But the story doesn't end there. As the reception continued, something magical happened. Guests began approaching Sarah, asking about her story, offering help, sharing resources. A lawyer offered free legal assistance. A business owner offered her a job. A real estate agent offered to help her find housing. Victoria's father, a wealthy philanthropist, was so moved that he asked Sarah to speak at his foundation's next event about homelessness and human dignity. Marcus watched it all unfold, amazed. He'd brought Sarah to make himself feel less alone, to have a companion at his ex's wedding. But what happened instead was that Sarah had touched every person in that room, had reminded them of their humanity, and had transformed what could have been an awkward, painful day into something meaningful. 3 months later, Sarah was no longer homeless. She had an apartment, a job at a nonprofit organization, and had become a speaker on issues of homelessness and poverty. Marcus and Sarah had become close friends, and he often said that she'd saved him that day as much as he'd helped her. The millionaire took a homeless woman to his ex's wedding expecting nothing. What she did shocked everyone, not through drama or revenge, but through simple, powerful humanity. She reminded a room full of privileged people that dignity isn't defined by circumstances, that grace isn't purchased with money, and that sometimes the people we overlook have the most to teach us. So, what do you rate this story? Comment below with a number from 0 to 10, and let us know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe to Behind the Door for more incredible stories. Until next time, remember that everyone has a story worth hearing.